Welcome back to the Brand to Fan Show. You know, I was in Phoenix back in my Arizona roots the week of the Super Bowl, which was also the same week as the WM Phoenix Open. And I had the chance to reconnect with my colleagues and take in some of the most ultimate of fan experiences across two highly regarded professional sports events. And one of the questions that I pondered along the way was, well, if I would have stayed at the PGA Tour or adjacently in sports, where would my career really have taken me over the past 8 years? Now, it's true. I can't really put my own career up against very many others across sports or brand. But let me introduce you to Jeramie McPeek, because Jeramie is a fellow social media sports OG. I mean, he is so OG. His social profiles are literally his first name, which is a huge testament to how long you've been playing in this space. Jeramie is now the founder of Jeramie McPeek Communications after spending 24 years with the Phoenix Suns, pretty much in every role in digital. And he was most recently the social media quarterback of the Arizona Super Bowl host committee. But more than that, Jeramie, you are an awesome person. And I'm so happy to have you on the Brand Fan Show, because I feel like we're going to be able to have a conversation that I haven't had yet on the show. And now that we're like several episodes in, it's kind of still fun to say. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lauren. So great to be here. And I think the O in OG stands for old at this point. So I've been doing this a long time, but always great to reconnect with you, and love to talk about sports and branding and social and all that stuff. I have to correct you though. My original social handles were actually a different name, and I had to negotiate with other Jeramies to acquire those. So I didn't have those from the beginning. So.
Oh, but you had enough swag to get them, which means that you are an OG.
I had some good, swag. Yeah, I had some good stories. Found somebody that had Jeramie in the Philippines, didn't speak English, so we went back and forth through Messenger for months. Me trying to translate what he was saying, him trying to figure out what I was saying, and eventually we agreed to some sort of deal, and he gave me the name, and then he never gave me his address to send him what I agreed to send him. And I asked over and over and over again, and I don't think he understood how to give an address or what I was looking for exactly. So thankfully I've got the name though. But
yeah, you got the name. That's what matters, whether or not that blue check mark turns gold or whatever it's going to do.
Yeah, right. My picture turns square. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you got the name. Well, that's, I think, again, testament to, and I remember sitting in a conference, I had been talking to, the head of Twitter Sports at the time, and kind of casually saying like, oh, I need to change my Twitter name because I got married. And I remember just sitting in a conference, and like mid-conference, my Twitter name changed. And I was like, oh no, that wouldn't necessarily happen today. So we've got tons of stories like that between the two of us. Tell me a little bit.
That wouldn't happen today because nobody's left at Twitter. So there'd be nobody to talk to. So
all right.
I say that sadly. Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. So many great people there that I'm sad are not there anymore, but yes.
Yeah, I feel the same way. So, let's start there. Obviously we were fans of Twitter and what it brought, and you and I probably both started using it for our respective sports organizations pretty early on. What is something that, whether it's technology related or sports related or whatever, what are you a fan of today that's really driving what you're doing?
Wow, that's a good question. What I'm a fan of really is the same thing I've been a fan of since I was a kid. And this you can look at my background if you're watching on YouTube. I'm a bit of a nerd, but I grew up a Disney fan. I've probably spent 150 days of my life in Disney parks. Grew up a massive Star Wars fan. Saw the first original movie in the theaters when I was 5 years old, and still can't wait for every episode of The Mandalorian on Disney Plus. I grew up a pro wrestling fan and still am, and actually work in pro wrestling some now. I do some broadcast work and also social media work in pro wrestling. So these are kind of things that I grew up with. So from like from toddler to grave, I'm going to be a fan of. And I think there's something about those three things that is very similar to what I'm doing today in terms of like the storytelling and trying to make larger than life characters and let people get to know these athletes away from the court or the field, and really try to build up that magical storytelling and the hero's journey, if you will, the good versus evil, my team versus the opponent. And so there's something about that I think, caught my imagination as a kid and still does today. And I kind of try to feed into that with all the social media work that I do for my different clients today.
Those classic storytelling elements, are things that maybe we learned in English class, or, we have the chance to kind of take with us, but you've done more than that. You've really like put them on, as part of your own work and manifested. What have you believed to be true about telling stories to fans and what they really need to hear to kind of build affinity for what you're doing? Because let's face it, like sports is sexy enough, right? You've got athletes, you've got access to, the Phoenix Suns, like world-class athletes at the Super Bowl, world-class athletes. But like you're saying, you got to take them off the field. You got to take them out of that particular hero moment, and then you create different ones. What's kind of been the way that you've always thought about that and how you put that together?
Yeah, I think, it's really about authenticity and really getting to the heart of who these people are and really trying to show that and showcase that. We all see these incredible athletes, out on the field and out on the court, out on the ice. And that's kind of what draws us to them initially. It's like, wow, the way that guy shoots is incredible, or I love his hustle or his defense or his 3-point shooting, or, that quarterback can scramble like nobody I've seen. It reminds me of this player from, my dad's generation, whatever. That's what draws us to them initially. But I think what really kind of bonds fans to players more than that is kind of feeling like they know who they are as people. They know what they're like, what their interests are, what their personality is like, what their sense of humor is like, what their hobbies are, or seeing that they're, a really good family man or family woman, seeing that they're a good parent. It's kind of telling those authentic stories and peeling back the celebrity and the fame and the putting them on that pedestal because they're this incredible athlete, but also showing that they're a human being, and you can kind of relate to that if you get to feel like you get to know them a little bit. So I think that's something that I've always tried as much as possible to be able to share those stories and connect with the athletes and try to get them to feel comfortable with me if I'm doing interviews with them or following them around with the camera, so that they do let their guard down a little bit and kind of give you that peek behind the curtain as to who they are as people.
Yeah, I remember that from having to do that as a 23-year-old on the PGA Tour, like when no one else was allowed to even have a cell phone on the PGA Tour, right. Inside the ropes or at the tournaments, and kind of following around. And I got a ton of sideways glances and like, is she really supposed to be here? Got accosted by a couple of security guards. Super, really, really interesting times. As you know, we talk a lot on the Brand Fan Show about this like kind of paradigm between grabbing attention and capturing that, right? Which is exactly what you're talking about with the athlete. Like, we're interested in how they perform or who they remind us of, or kind of like what their talents are. But surely it's the other things, right? It's peeling back those kind of layers of the onion to really unpack who they are is how we make those emotional connections. And I think that's true for brands, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I think it's not always an easy thing to do, to peel that onion back and make those, authentic, genuine connections. But I think it's something that we all need to be striving for when we're working in this industry, and we're working in marketing or branding or public relations or whatever. Obviously, you want to tell the best stories possible, but for those stories to really resonate and really to connect with people, it has to be authentic and has to be genuine. It can't feel like it's spin, and it can't feel like you're just, you're fabricating something to try and make somebody, look like something they're not. I mean, I think that always shines through. And
Sure.
I think brands are the same way. Brands have to be genuine and authentic, and it can't just be always about selling and convincing you that, whatever latest slogan or latest product or whatever it is, trying to trick people into getting on board with your brand. You have to be authentic and real.
Yeah, you have had the keys to some of the most awesome accounts in sports, right? You've literally had the keys to the accounts of, NBA teams, of Super Bowl host committee, professional wrestling. And you've probably also helped on the side with some other big name and profile athletes and
Sure.
events as well. But when you get the keys, maybe for the very first time, what's that first thing that you do? Like, what are you doing when you log in for the first time, when you're preparing to take over? How do you do that?
Those are two different questions. What do I do and how do I do that?
Okay.
I think the first thing I do if I get the keys to a really big account, I do a little snooping. I look at their insights and I look at what kind of impressions they get on posts, just out of curiosity. There've been a few times, a number of times over the last couple of years where the NBA has hired me to help run their Instagram for games, and I'll create Instagram stories or create content for Reels or create TikToks or Snapchat stories during games. And that's always pretty just mind-blowing to log in and see the numbers that they get, as one of the best brands in the world on social media. Huge shout out to Ashley Atwell and Bob Carney, who you need to get on here, your podcast at some point. Both of them would be amazing guests, but they do an incredible job. So any time I've had a chance to work with them and log in, that's the first thing I'm doing. And I'm looking at the numbers. I'm like, oh my gosh, the story post I just did got, 20,000 views in 2 minutes. And and so that's really mind boggling. But I think when I'm, logging in to a new client's account or a new partner that I'm working with or an athlete that I'm kind of helping manage their social for them, really the most important thing to do, first of all, is really study what they've been doing recently and over the last year, and really reading their captions closely and looking at the content closely, because you want to, if you're going to go in and represent that brand or that athlete or that person, you want to make sure that the content you're creating on their behalf represents them well and matches their existing voice and their tone. And you don't want a fan sitting at home on the couch to be looking at social and saying, this doesn't look like something that they would have posted yesterday or this morning. You don't want the fan to have any idea that somebody different is, on the keyboard or on the phone at the moment. So that's really the number one thing I do when logging into a new client's account, is really try to study them in advance before I post anything. Really look closely at what they're posting, how they post it, when they post it, what they say, what, like, maybe certain types of words or phrases they use, the hashtags they use or not use, really, so I can kind of try and match it and represent them the best way possible.
And when you have to do that, it's probably because they've actually never thought to articulate brand voice, brand tone. Here's my catchphrases. Here's the emoji that I use. Like, probably most times that's not necessarily documented for you. And I'm just going to have a hunch, because I don't think that any athletes that I worked with, unless I wrote it for them,
right,
they really had that, right? But I think that is something that, any sort of brand, when you get to a point where you do have somebody else chiming in or being part of that, the more clarity that you can provide around, my tone is X, the voice is such, we use, like, we write like in this style, our eye, the things that we take pictures of, or the angle of how we take pictures, all of those are very nuanced. And you said,
sure,
if you get them wrong, someone else is going to know it so well that they're going to call you out on that. Right.
Yeah, no question. And, like you said, big brands do have that strategy written out, and they do have those things thought through, and they do kind of prep you. So anytime I have worked with the NBA, they'll provide me documentation. We'll have calls. We'll talk through things before I do anything. I just had a call today with Jeffrey Donnelly from the NCAA, and I'm working for the Arizona host committee for the 2024 men's Final Four, which is going to be here in a little less than a year. But had a call today with him, and we're really talking through the strategy, because as the host committee, we'll be able to actually post to the M Final Four social handles over the next year,
awesome.
leading up to the game, to kind of really show fans nationally what's happening on a local level to prepare for and build excitement for the Final Four coming to Arizona. So had a great call with him, and he had a fantastic, really well thought out documentation, 8-10 pages long. He had an Excel doc with 8 different tabs everything from hashtags to tone of voice to different links and which bit.ly type of shortener they use and everything. So everything was consistent, and that we made sure that when we're taking over, we matched their brand philosophy and their brand standards. So was really excited to be able to have that conversation with him and get all that information so that I can do my job best to really represent them the right way.
Absolutely. I was thinking about this as I've been using and experimenting with AI generation, like ChatGPT and things. And so one way that I've been doing it is both getting more clued in. This is probably one of the things that I didn't really write down even for myself, right? What is my brand voice and tone? I do it for clients all of the time. I haven't actually, but I had to sketch it out because it was the missing link between like, okay, results from like a ChatGPT prompt to like much clearer sounding like me. And I had to do this two ways: write my own and feed it in, but also take some of my better writing, or not even better, just like some of the writing that I'll do on a blog or what have you. I write it up and then I'll feed it back in and say, tell me what the voice, the tone, like you identify it so that I can say, like, if I want it to be like this, well, let's use the words of ChatGPT to like redefine what I'm doing. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting way of playing that. But I'm, like it was important before, right? For anybody who is going to contribute to a brand's identity, because if it's off, it's going to create confusion and for the audience. But now that we have other things, not just humans generating content for us potentially, then you have to be even more clear about what the thing is that you need. And these are the kind of the elements that are going to take like decent prompts to get decent results to like, oh, now it went from 50% there to 90% there.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something that I'll have to pick your brain on, because I have not experimented with a whole lot yet. I've certainly been reading a lot about AI and the different use cases and how it's being used to write copy and create responses and social media, potential copy. And so that scares me a little bit, but I am anxious to dive into it. And so we'll have set up a second call with you to learn more about what you're finding out and how you're doing it.
Absolutely. I talked about this to Ann Handley a few episodes ago. I think episode 9 or 10. And Ann was really still bullish that, AI writing is not going to replace writers because of the human elements. And she's come out and spoken a lot about that. And so I think it's not really something that I'm telling my clients, like, don't be scared of it, but use it. Like, it's not actually an assistant. It's a guide. Use it to fill in the things that you don't know, or use it to get your prompt so good that it can act as kind of a second piece. So there's certainly some opportunities for what you're going to be doing. And I'm of course happy to talk to you about that on a different call.
Yeah, for sure. And I should note, I'm not scared it's going to replace me. So I don't, it's not like a Star Wars thing where the droids are going to come in and take over, but it scares me just in terms of like, once I kind of fully trust it and let it run, is it going to actually get everything right? And is going to could make mistakes. And, like I've heard about, sports teams are even talking about potentially using AI to write their game recaps that will appear on their websites. And that's scary to me too, because what if the AI accidentally, mentions a DUI that a player had, or references a player that, was released or got released because he punched a coach, or whatever. It scares me of the possibilities. But I know that if you're using it the right way and really prepping it and training it and keeping an eye on it, it's going to be incredibly valuable. So I am excited to dive into it more.
Yeah. And I think already we can see use cases. So I remember at the PGA Tour, even several years ago, we were talking about that, right? Can we write gamers for every single player based on like ingesting their shot data in their scorecard? Can we write a 2-paragraph gamer for every player for every round that they play? Like, actually, like even 7 years ago, that was super possible. Yet when I watched the Masters tournament, which I'm sure you did too, at least part of it, for the first time they had in the My Groups where you can assign like which players you're watching, and then you can just go to a tab of video that literally is just every shot from every player that you choose, which is fascinating. And I love, it's one of my favorite ways to watch, right? Especially if I'm catching up from not being able to watch for a little while, but I could not stand the AI generated voice that and the script, what they were creating. I turned it off immediately. I turned it off as soon as I found like how to turn it off, pull down the volume. I did, because it just didn't add anything for me.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I listened long enough to understand the cues and understand kind of what the generation was. And it wasn't even so much the robot voice. It was it just sounded stupid.
Yeah.
So
it was probably distracting you from what you were, the entertainment or the information you were trying to get, because you knew it was AI and you knew what was happening.
yeah, I wonder if it would have been worked if you were listening from a different language. I wonder if that would have worked if they tried that. Because I can see where that's like
that's
a
good point.
Enhancement experience.
Right.
And that might be an easier way to do that instead of paying, multiple broadcasters with multiple translation skills to do that. But
that's a good point.
For my fan experience, like I'll turn it off. I'll actually choose a channel that has, some commentators that I actually enjoy listening to that showed up at the Masters, that kind of thing. But that kind of leads me to another question kind of about fan experience and culture. You and not to throw out the old and OG, but you were at the Phoenix Suns, as digital became really a thing and then a product and then something everybody did. Yeah. And specifically, like one of my thesis is that social media has certainly accelerated how fans assimilate and how fan culture has evolved so rapidly over the last 15 or 20 years, thanks to the internet. So I'm curious what
that makes sense
from the beginning, from like when Shaq started on Twitter, when you kind of went from like, okay, we have a website. Okay, we have a thing, we have content. Okay, we have a highlight. Okay, we have Twitter. What are you seeing in fan culture overall that's changed?
Yeah, wow, that's a good question. Not something I've really thought a lot about in terms of fan culture, but certainly it's dramatically different in a pretty short period of time. I was there when NBA.com launched and all the teams were assigned a page on the information superhighway, and it was, that role was handed to me, and the PR director said, I don't know what this is, here, you do this. And I didn't really know what it was either, but kind of learned it from the ground up. But I mean, at that point we were producing a monthly magazine, and it was being mailed to 15,000 people, almost all of whom lived in Arizona. And fast forward 10 years, we're reaching 50 million people, 75 million people in 200 countries, and we're doing it in almost real time. And so the distribution method has changed obviously dramatically, and I think we've seen that evolution continue to grow. Now with social, now it's the numbers are ridiculous, and they're we're reaching fans in their pockets, on the go, in their cars, on the subway, at the doctor's office, whatever. But I think in terms of culture, I would say in a lot of ways it's probably strengthened the fan base and made fans bigger fans. Younger fans are consuming more content about their favorite sports teams and leagues on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram than maybe that generation was 20, 30 years ago, that would sit down and watch a game on TV with their friends or family once or twice a week. Now they're getting that content all week long, wherever they go. And so they're maybe bigger and stronger fans. But at the same time, social media, has also created this negativity and people kind of feeding on that. And so a lot of times there's a lot more bickering, a lot more complaining, a lot more negative comments about players, and people sitting on their phone and thinking they can say anything they want, and they would never in a million years say that to a player face to face if they saw them. So there's this weird freedom that people have now, and a lot of people take advantage of it and abuse it, and that kind of feeds other people's negativity. And so the culture is good in some ways, that it's a stronger fan base, I think, more engaged, more passionate. And then there's this other group of the other side of the teeter-totter that's a lot more negative and vocal and angry. And so it's kind of weird how culture has changed. I don't know that you can really define it as one type of culture now. There's this mix.
Yeah. And is the person who's actually watching that in real time like you're not the athlete whose phone is in the locker room while they're playing. And now we know most athletes don't really engage on social on a game day, after a game, because of that negativity. They just don't want to see it. Or if they are, it's very like it's the burner account. It's like the very few people that they really trust to kind of give them those good things. But you and I remember that too, like real time. So it could be like, I don't like that commercial. I don't like the thing that person said, like my popcorn's stale, like all of it comes to you when you're kind of running the keys. But some of that you need to kind of accelerate or triage immediately. And most of it kind of goes by the wayside. And I know we're both kind of PR geeks a little bit at heart too. Where's that line for your clients to say like, okay, if it's in this category, I'm triaging it to you immediately, and you have to do something because I'm just the social like I'm running social. I can't triage and be your customer service. And also, how do you tell them like actually those things that are said in the heat of the moment like won't translate into bigger issues necessarily? Do you have to talk to your clients about that?
Yeah, I mean, every client I have is a little different. I've got one client just as an example that is it's got like 8 different hospitals here in Arizona. One of the biggest hospital chains, I guess, is not really a chain, but 8 different hospitals here in Arizona. And every single day we hop into Sprinkler and we're keeping a look at what people are saying about those hospitals. And so, we've got, pre-written answers to certain types of responses. If somebody's complaining about billing, we'll forward that to a billing person. If someone, heaven forbid, says that, something really bad happened in my experience at the hospital, we'll elevate that to someone in management or HR. But then there's, thousands of other responses we're getting that, they loved their experience, they loved their doctor, they loved their nurse. And so we're quickly responding to those people, thank you, and letting them know. So that client's very different than, an athlete that I work with. Can't say his name, but a professional wrestling legend who I help run his social accounts. And he doesn't really like social media at all, but knows he needs it. So I kind of just keep an eye on things for him and let him know if I see anything that he really needs to know, or if he wants, if I see some really positive feedback that he may want to hear about to, encourage him, I'll pass that on. Or if one of his wrestling legend friends says something positive about him, I'll tell him. But that's very different in terms of, working with the Super Bowl host committee, where we had a whole command center, and our entire command center during Super Bowl week was responding to thousands of questions about tickets and parking and transportation and weather and entry to buildings and when's this autograph session going to happen. And so every client is a little different, and it's hard to say, there's not really a set rule for any of them in terms of when I'm going to escalate something or not. But it's a fine line. There's a lot of juggling going on and a lot of judgment calls on the fly about, do they need to know about this, or should I tell them about this, or should I not even bother them because that's just going to annoy them?
Yeah, I was on a great debate a few weeks ago about is organic social media truly a marketing channel? And I was actually like by a coin flip placed on team against, like, no, this isn't an actual marketing channel. And one of the cases that I made for that was it's not a true marketing channel because it serves so many other purposes. So like, just like you were saying, it serves a huge customer service role. Does a display ad or a TV ad in that same way, like a direct mail does not serve a customer service role in the same way. So like kind of our team argued for like social media is such a broad term that encapsulates so many things. Like marketing is a function, but it's not actually a channel because of all of those pieces that you were just mentioning, right? It's brand, but it's also service, it's support, it's awareness, like it's communication and collaboration and all those things. But like without, obviously without having that debate with you here, just curious kind of where you fall on that. Like, is it a true marketing channel in the same way, or do you kind of see more nuance there?
I think it is. I think social is a marketing channel, but not in the same way. those are two different things. It's not like a traditional TV spot, a banner ad, a print ad in the newspaper, a magazine ad. It's a very different kind of marketing channel. But it's all those other things too. It's so much more than a marketing channel. So, I mean, I think all brands need to look at social look at the opportunities there for marketing and branding. But they have to realize that's not all it is. There's so much more to it. It's like saying an NBA game is a marketing channel because we can have banner ads on the courtside signage and on the building up above, and can get the announcer to say tonight's starting lineup is brought to you by Kia or whoever. That doesn't mean that there's great ways to market through that and use marketing through that, but that doesn't make the entire game just that's what it is. It's a marketing channel.
I like that nuance. And I'm going to pull you onto team no because of all the things that
I could go back and forth. I'll be the moderator of this.
I know that was actually, it was such
debate.
a fascinating debate. Agora Pulse put it together, and it was so much fun. And I was really glad to be part of that just because of these kind of like nuanced conversations and where you could really like lean.
I'd love to hear that. Is that online somewhere? Is that it?
It is. It is online.
Okay.
It's on my LinkedIn profile.
Okay. I'll look it up. Okay.
How do you measure success? So if we are talking about whether it's a marketing channel or all these other things as well, how are you measuring success specifically in social around affinity? Like, do you have anything that really demonstrates or a key metric that you're going to look at? And it might be over time with some of these clients that you've worked with for years and years and years.
Right.
That it's not necessarily about the vanity, like, did we get attention, but it's truly about the affinity building.
Oh boy, I don't have a great answer for that, at least off the top of my head. That may be one for a longer discussion, but I think if I think engagement is one good metric to look at. If if your content is getting good engagement, then probably it's because your followers, your audience is liking what you're putting out, and they're liking that. So that's a good indication of affinity, I think. If you see your following continues to grow, that means that's probably a good sign as well, that people are happy with what you're putting out and liking the content you're posting. But I think a lot of times it's those one-off examples where you see people actually post something to you or send you a direct message or comment about your brand and how much they love what you're doing and they love the brand because of this and they love your social efforts. And I've got one client, an MMA client out of LA, Up Next Fighting, and they've only been around for a year. But I don't know if I've ever worked with the client that puts so much emphasis and effort, especially like a startup client that's put so much emphasis and effort into their branding and their really connecting with their fans and with their fighters and letting the fighters know how much they appreciate them and how much they love them. And every single event that the fighters come to, they're given this, swag bag of all this Up Next Fighting merchandise, and all these guys just, absolutely love it. And they're all posting themselves about Up Next Fighting is the best promotion ever. I've never had a MMA promotion treat us so well. And, and it's really paying off. And so those are the examples that I see a fighter say something about it or post about it, and I can grab it and share it with the owners and the fight promoters and say, hey, here's people talking about how great you treat them and how much they appreciate the coverage we're giving them on social, how much they love the fact that, we did a in-depth interview and profile and really professional looking feature video package on them. And they're talking about that. So that's the affinity I can show because people are actually saying how much they appreciate it. So it's more than just metrics, I think, and metrics can be a little misleading.
They can be. What's your approach then? Like, so you were just talking about that with the client of that was kind of some brand building content, but there's also then you've got to promote how to watch, how to buy tickets, the kind of the promotional side, the selling side of that. What is your kind of rule of thumb for balancing both promotional content with that community or brand building piece that is so important?
Yeah, again, I don't have a rule of thumb because every client is a little different, depending on what the product is, what you're trying to sell, what the event is, how often they have events, all that kind of thing. If they're, if they're season ticket holder, if they got season ticket holders, or it's a single game buy, or They typically sell out, or they really have trouble selling tickets. So they're all a little different in terms of, the frequency and volume of those kind of promotional posts. But I think a huge key is trying to make those promotional posts attractive, really cool graphics, a good video spot, a good, a profile piece on an athlete, or a video interview about the athlete, and then in the messaging you talk about, come see this athlete and tickets are on sale now. So it's not real effective if it's just going to be an ad. If it looks like an ad, we just did a 1 year in-depth analysis of the Fiesta Bowl's social media channels. They're one of my clients, and we looked at every single platform: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. And we looked at every post that they did in the last year. So thousands of posts, and we categorized them by, was it video content? Was it photography? Was it graphics? Was it a carousel? Was it a reel? Was it a story? And what was the messaging behind it? Was it community relations efforts? Was it a player profile? Was it game specific? And really took a look at all that to kind of try and figure out what's working for them and what's not, and what we need to adjust for next year. And one of the things we found was that graphics just are not doing well, especially on Instagram. Even the most beautiful, gorgeous, creative graphics, they're just not doing well. And I think it's because people are kind of just scrolling by those things thinking that it's an ad. They don't even take time to really look at it, or they glance at it and they move on because it feels like an ad, even though the graphic design behind it is amazing. So, but yet reels are blowing up, right? So the reels are getting 10 times the impressions and engagements. So we need to think through that this year, figure out, if we're going to be promoting a special ticket package, or we're doing some community relations efforts that we want people to know about, we need to really customize that content so it is in a real format, and it's 23 seconds because 23 works better than 60, and so you're constantly evaluating how to do that and how to push that out. That's a very long-winded answer to your question about what the frequency is or volume in terms of those posts, but I think it's always changing, and we're always having to kind of rethink how we get that messaging out.
Yeah. And like you said, there's not maybe a rule of thumb because it is client dependent, but I think also your background, like maybe you don't think about it as that, right? But if somebody hands you like, here's my content pillars, and 2 are very promotional driven and 1 is story driven, you as the expert are going to flip those, right? Or you're going to weave in the way to do that. And I think that not everybody thinks in that same way. So I think like it might not be, but I think from the outside in, looking at what you do, I would definitely say that you've got that approach that's really strong, and would speak to why you work on so many different impressive brands and pieces of content and things like that. So so maybe there's not one like that comes to mind, but I definitely think that you have that there. So
it's you said storytelling, that's what it is. It's if they want 2 promotional posts versus 1 story post, how do we make the 2 promotional posts also have a story, angle? How do they tell that story too, so that it doesn't feel like we're just selling to somebody?
Yeah. And what's the hottest content type, because it's going to change in 30 days anyways.
Yes.
So it's so fun. I'm so proud of you for sticking with it, because I haven't been, I still work on a lot of like clients on this side. It exhausts me day to day. And so like the analysis that you were talking about, that's where I get excited now, right? Is like, what can I unpack? What can I dive into? And creating the content, has kind of passed me by in some respects. So that's why when I say I can't really, my career doesn't really hold a candle to yours, and how sports and social has moved forward. I kind of bounced out at the right time, I think. So.
Well, your career's been amazing as well. You're doing all kinds of awesome things, and can't wait for everybody to see your next big venture as it comes to fruition.
Thank you so much. Jeramie, the question that we ask everybody on the show, and I prepped you, but it was a little while ago. So I'm really curious in all of your years in sports and the time that you've had and your initial fandom, what is the one piece of fan wear that either will never leave your closet or is so tattered that you had to eventually give it up? What's the thing that you hold dear?
Wow. I do now that you say that, I do remember that question. I've got let's see. I've got a Phoenix Suns game-worn uniform from 1991 that was worn by Nigel Knight, who was the backup point guard to Kevin Johnson. And I just love it because it's the old style uniforms, really, really short shorts, really tight jersey, and it's just a really cool look. So I love that. I've got this one's a little sad now, but I've got a t-shirt that a bootleg t-shirt maker was selling outside the Suns arena during the, what year would that have been? 2006 playoffs, I believe, when Raja Bell clotheslined Kobe Bryant in the middle of the game.
Oh, I remember that.
Because they kept fighting throughout that series, and Kobe was getting under Raja's skin, and he just like literally clotheslined him like a wrestling clothesline. And at the time, I was not a Kobe Bryant fan, did not like Kobe Bryant at all, and I loved Raja Bell, and I loved his grit and his hustle. And so when I found out there was someone selling a t-shirt out on the street corner with a picture of the clothesline, I ran out and bought it real quick before going back to work. And so I've still got that in my closet because that's a fun memory. And I've got somewhere up here, I've got Raja Bell's shoe from that series. It's the only time I ever asked an athlete for anything, any kind of merchandise or anything. But after that playoffs, I said to him, hey, I absolutely loved your play in this series. I respect you so much. If you're ever getting rid of any of your shoes or anything, I would love one for my office. And he just like kind of sat back and was like, wow, that means so much to me. And he immediately took both of his shoes off, signed them, and gave them to me. So I've still got that shoe up here from that series against Kobe and the Lakers. So that's another one, I guess.
Dude, that is an incredible story.
It was pretty neat. Yeah, it was pretty, because he was depressed. They just been eliminated from playoffs. So when I said that to him, I think it like lifted his spirit and meant a lot to him. So it was pretty cool.
And what's really funny is I know that you have some other shoe story. Like you're actually kind of a weird collector of then like shoes or shoe products, right? Because you have like one more really cool shoe thing.
Is this the Jordan one? Is that the one you're thinking of?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's another one. So yeah, in '96, when Jordan came out of retirement and rejoined the NBA, his first game back in Phoenix, after the game was over, I went into the Bulls locker room and because we could always go into the locker rooms and interview players. And so I went into the locker room, was in the huddle, as Jordan was talking about the game. And I remember him talking about how impressed he was with a young rookie, Steve Nash, on the Suns. And I thought that was pretty cool and funny to look back on. But before he started talking to the reporters, he took off his Air Jordans and he ripped out the insole, the Nike insole of his shoe, and he threw it in the trash. And so as soon as the locker room cleared out, I like went over to the trash and I like took it out of the trash. And I kept it. And I still got it today, almost 30 years later. So I figured I wasn't stealing anything because it was trash at that point. So, but it was, from Michael Jordan's Air Jordan. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's not trash to most of us, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Jeramie, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Brand to Fan show. I have learned a ton from you just in this short time that we've been together. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of yours. This is the time where I do the too long, didn't listen recap for the Brand to Fan listeners who maybe kind of skip through or just want to get to the end and hear kind of all the good stuff at once. So let me give this a shot and you can let me know if I missed anything. Jeramie, it's clear that fandom has been part of your life all your life. You grew up as a Disney fan and as a Star Wars fan and even as a pro wrestling fan. And those experiences, it feels like to me, has really shaped your thoughts on both fandom and storytelling, because you have always been part of this group that has gotten really good at unpacking the authenticity of story on social and not just kind of relying on the attention or the highlight reels to really help build fandom for the brands, the clients, the sports teams, and the athletes that you work with. We talked a little bit about when you get the keys to an account that you immediately get curious and you're looking at what's happening over the last few months and what's like an over time, and also who's there, who's paying attention as the audience, how big is that audience, what are they looking for, so that you can represent your clients in their existing voice and tone and really match that presence and don't create any confusion with that. We also talked about kind of how fan experience has evolved over the last 15 or 20 years and accelerated because of the online tools, that now we can reach fans in their pockets wherever they are, rather than just the fans in our little region. And so that's actually created a culture where fans are better fans. They're more knowledgeable, they're more engaged, they know more about the stories, the athletes, the teams, and all of that. But you and I also talked about how that's not really all sunshine and rainbows, and that creates a lot of risk and a lot of opportunities for like abuse and other things. So it's like kind of that double-sided edged sword, right? So we also talked a little bit, the last thing I want to just grab here is, we talked a little bit about, is social media a marketing channel? But in the same way that the NBA game can be used as a marketing channel, I love that analogy, right? That's not all of it. Like, to say it is a marketing opportunity doesn't encapsulate the whole purpose of what that is. And I think that's a really great takeaway for people who are thinking about how to use these different channels or these different tools and technologies in order to build fans. What do you think?
That was impressive. I didn't see you take any notes during our call or in our Zoom here. So I'm wondering if you had like an AI chatbot that was like transcribing and making notes from what I was saying, because that was an impressive recap. That was good.
Thank you. No, that's all me. That's all me. That's my
good
superpower
memory
these
days.
Wow. I might not make a reel in less than an hour, but I can summarize an hour-long conversation
That's awesome.
in a minute or less. So yeah, there we go.
Well, you can fit that 2-minute recap on Twitter now. You can just put the recap up, and no one will have to listen to.
There you go. That should be my thread
minutes.
There. I should just kind of stitch it in. I've heard threads work on Twitter, so maybe I should try that.
There you go.
Well, I am Lauren Teague, and my guest today was Jeramie McPeek. Such a pleasure to have you. Jeramie, where can our listeners find you, follow you online?
Yeah, Lauren, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I've been excited to be part of the show. You've had some amazing guests, and I'm honored to be among your guests with Farron Benjamin and Jay Bear and Tamsin Webster. And all three of those people are amazing human beings that I've got a chance to work with and learned a lot from. So I'm humbled to be a part of your group with them. So thank you for that. And people can follow me if they're interested. As you mentioned, my social handle is just my first name, although it's spelled a little funky, Jeramie. And that's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'm also on TikTok, although I did not get my first name there. Or you can look me up on LinkedIn.
Cool. Well, we'll be sure to connect all of those into the show notes, along with maybe if you can send me a picture of a close-up of that, either the very old Phoenix Suns jersey or the shoe on your desk behind you. We'll be sure to put that on the brand2fan.show, where show notes for this episode and everyone will go. So such a pleasure. Good luck. And we'll definitely be following you in many different ways online. This has been the Brand Fan Show. Thanks for joining us.